the family came here in the 1850s. It means everything to do with life and my family because we've been here that long. And I think we should always do what we can to maintain our quality of life here.
When I had children, I decided I wanted to raise them in the woods. We lived in our fifth wheel while we built our house. My kids were part of the building process. We planned on building and having our family there for the duration of our life and hopefully future generations.
Tenino's pretty tight niche. You know, everyone's gates closed, but we all know each other. Angela Ronaldo sounding like we're going to have some beautiful neighbors here in Tenino, not sexually violent predators.
Residents are pushing back against a facility meant to house sex offenders from McNeil Island from coming into their neighborhood.
The plan is for a 15-acre property in this rural area near Tenino to become a less restrictive alternative, or LRA.
Good afternoon. My name's Angela Ronaldo. I'm the CEO of Supreme Living. And I'm here today to advise you that we are holding a meet and greet to discuss with the community of Tenino the proposed Supreme Living project.
A little teeny line in a newspaper was sent out to the residents and said there's going to be a community meeting, and that's how we found out about it. So we knew that they were going to try to cite a sexually violent predator, less restrictive alternative housing in rural Tenino.
My husband Nicholas and I spent a year and a half renovating and cleaning up the home. Their real estate agent negligently represented their client, stating that they would be fostering children.
This playground is right next door to the facility that is planning to be open.
This house is not a secure location and borders the Maytown Lake, which is a private corporation established in 1986. The lake hosts junior development camps for the USA Water Ski Association. The lake also hosts on a regular basis charity events to teach blind children how to water ski.
Raymond, what are your red flags?
Babysitting, parks, fairgrounds, like malls, movies, and stuff like that. And also being around small kids.
It's day 3 of being in office after being sworn in, and I start getting a bunch of messages about sexually violent predators, SVPs. The moniker SVP is a little bit different. They are a sex offender. They did serve time, but a court along the line deemed them that these individuals would reoffend if given the chance. And essentially that's why they're civilly committed. The house in Tenino that was proposed in my district with no security, with the help of state agencies.
We've got an island that used to be a prison. They've got a whole island of predators that are being held. There are more locks and keys to get on and off the Special Commitment Center. There are more Sally parts. There are more cameras. There are more guards. The security out there is really off the charts.
Can you describe any other outreach you've done so that the folks that might be most interested in attending would know?
Yes, I posted on the Tenino Bucota Facebook page.
When she posted into the Tenino Bucota page that has 100 people in it rather than like the main Tenino page, and just said, we're going to have a meet and greet here. She didn't share a lot of information. She just actually like proposed it like, this is an exciting thing. This is coming to our community.
I get a ton of messages I normally cannot go through. I've got thousands of messages. But that one, for some reason, I saw it and was like, I started with sex offender kind of thing, so I clicked on it and I'm like, well, okay, I'll go. I went in there open-minded and really came out of it with a pretty closed mind.
I think the lack of adequate notification was intentional on their part to keep us in the dark, consequently the community in the dark, allowing them time to maneuver through the system to the degree that they were able to place these people in that residential situation.
It's enough for me to feel comfortable with the agreement. So, ma'am, I've got 9 grandchildren, and I have children. I understand your concern that your children are at risk. I'm suggesting to you they are less at risk, that that facility is there, that home is there. than they would be if it wasn't.
That was pretty much the worst presentation I've ever seen. I'm doing this. I don't care what you think. It's totally lawful, and I'm here to make money. Any questions?
I don't want to speculate because I have 20 some odd individuals that I'm currently serving. We have not seen any of the kinds of problems or concerns that you're insinuating might happen here.
Well, if there's a problem, we'll call 911. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if my one deputy is available, that's great. But who is actually monitoring these people? And that was another piece, was that unfortunately that company didn't actually understand how it was their first time dipping their toes into this.
I don't know what that answer is. That's a DSHS question. That's a DSHS question.
With the company not actually understanding how the process worked, but then DOC and DSHS aren't standing with that company at this community event, explaining to the public and fact-checking some things that are said. I mean, when I was being told there's no monitoring, there's no locks on the house, it's basically a staff member who will be trained, but not armed or no detention authority or anything like that will be overseeing these people, and they'll call 911 if they run. I'm like, whoa.
Two things can be true at the same time. You have a protocol that says you will call DOC. I believe that exists. The problem is, if you want to call DOC right now, I'll get you their answering machine. They do not work after 5 p.m. The only option you have is that law enforcement has a private number where we call to confirm warrants that are already in the system. That's the only 24-hour DOC service.
And I have a private number for every DOC officer working with those folks in Olympia.
Okay. That was a parole officer. I know what that means. If there is something where the DOC officer is going to respond at 2 in the morning on Friday night, I'm good with this, because a DOC officer can then start working on that policy. But until, I've never heard of this. They don't do it with convicted felons for murder who are on probation release. I find it hard to believe they're going to do it for sex offenders on one in tonight.
Well, I can give you one assurance. If I don't have that support from the state, then I will make sure I have it. Because if you're telling me I'm not going to have that support, and I don't know, because I haven't opened this facility.
Judges who aren't in Thurston County are making these decisions. When we get to citing, I think that's where it needs to go to local jurisdiction. If you went and asked a judge in King County, hey, how many deputy sheriffs do you think are working in Thurston County in this district? I doubt they would have any idea what you're talking about.
Also, there is an opportunity, if and I believe this is correct, for us to put ankle bracelets on these individuals as well. So in the event that we had concerns, then we could do that for added security.
Some of the ankle bracelet technology is really good. And I actually will say that based on my experience, the technology that is ran through the government seems to actually be better. There seems to be a little bit, at least that's what we see in like our jail system, like our EHM release system. A lot of the private companies are more of a Monday through Friday monitoring, and then we'll catch up on Monday about what happened over the weekend.
The King 5 investigators have found when there's a violation, county workers aren't seeing the alerts on nights or weekends. Court documents outline a recent home monitoring case where a man allegedly told his pregnant girlfriend he was going to kill her. Soon after, a judge released him from the King County Jail and instead put him on electronic home monitoring. The plan fell apart. 3 months later, in May, Federal Way Police arrested him for the exact same crime. Allegations he strangled his pregnant girlfriend and punched her 6-year-old son in the face, all while wearing his electronic ankle bracelet.
The convicted level 3 sex offender was released from prison on Saturday, and he told authorities he would be staying at the Tacoma Rescue Mission. Instead, today, he cut off that tracker, and now deputies are concerned for the public safety.
Gary has a lot of respect across the county, I think. You know, he's got a little more conservative voice, I think, on the board, and I think you'd be fooling yourself if you thought that South County wasn't a little more conservative.
I was the elected sheriff here for 5 terms. In almost 40 years, I've never known a rehabilitated sex offender. I've just known educated sex offenders that were able to circumvent the system, so to speak, where they could prey on victims. Private prisons are not allowed here in Washington State. So I didn't see a big difference here between a private prison and a private home converted to a business in which prisoners were detained. So I think they were skirting the intent of the law, if not the law itself.
She needs to purchase the property within the next couple of days. Due to her location and proximity to other homes, we don't see anything with the naked eye.
For security, Supreme Living plans to have cameras in shared living spaces. She may also have alarms on the doors and windows as well.
We were informed Supreme Living has had different connectivity issues with phones, etc. Supreme Living conducted research into GPS to determine coverage area. He stated there are concerns and questioned the possibility of having to trial the types of GPS units. During the initial conversation, there appeared to be a level of aggressive engagement from Angela Rinaldo based upon the questions. Some of the answers she provided highlight a potential lack of understanding. We were specifically discussing her understanding of security and chaperoning residents in the community. It brings into question her future cooperation with DOC.
I have a master's degree. I know what I am doing.
Do you return them to their house, or do they get to go to jail? No, my assumption is they wouldn't return to our home. They will? They will not. Oh, so they'll go to jail? My assumption is they will.
Is that all you have is assumptions?
I'm sorry?
Is that all you have is assumptions?
That's the best I can give you tonight.
Well, you're moving a dangerous facility into our neighborhood, and that's all you can give us.
I can give you as much information as I have available to me.
This issue of releasing people into the community, less restrictive alternative for sexually violent predators, really upset the community. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a bipartisan issue.
We weren't really notified of all the new things that were being incorporated, right? The injection of kind of a capitalistic insertion of this, right? Where, hey, we're going to have private corporations bid for these spots now, and we're kind of turning this into a profit-based kind of deal.
I couldn't imagine that you could make a lot of money by running a halfway house, if you will, for sexually violent predators. You can make $1 million per less restrictive alternative that a sexually violent predator is placed into. The site had no fencing, no security cameras, none of the issues that the legislature said needed to be in place before a less restrictive alternative placement was found.
People don't want private prisons. Generally speaking, right? Like, we don't want to make this profit cash cow off of incarcerating people, right? I think morally there's just something that speaks to people like, that should really just be a government function, and it's just a paid government function. Like, there's no profiting off of it. And that's exactly what we've done with these LRAs.
This is a for-profit business, so businesses' decisions are being made. That's likely why they're down here. Housing's cheaper, right? That's right. But there's also rules, right? My understanding is that it was initially supposed to be a 6-person facility. Is that true?
No. We have batted around a whole variety of numbers.
Okay, and it is very important to have under 6. If you have 6, there's a county permit required. If you have 5, no permit required. This is a business decision.
One thing they'll tell you about these LRAs is that people can get sent back for almost any reason, right? Go on the internet and look at something you're not supposed to look at, sent back to McNeil Island kind of thing. Like, that's a violation, we'll send you back. But if my business model is about keeping people here and not on that island, am I going to report the minor violation that you were looking at something on the internet you weren't supposed to look at, or that you went outside when you weren't supposed to? I mean, those are the kind of the questions I think that come up on a private scale that don't really occur with government stuff.
Fair share. How many of you are aware of what fair share is? So it's a state protocol that says that the fair share for each county to take and receive back the number of people whom they have contributed to the system. So Thurston County has 11 fair share spots. 11. And right now, you have 0 support facilities for these individuals.
We were surprised when we met the man who was going to be the supervisor, elderly, overweight, had never worked with sex offenders. We spoke to people who had worked in the kitchen of her other locations in Olympia, and they didn't even know they were working with sex offenders. They weren't forthcoming with the information. Like, this is who you're working with. This is who is going to be around you. They were also told, the staff was told, like, if somebody were to be abused, do not tell anybody, only tell internal people. Like, it couldn't go to DSHS, the DOC, it couldn't go to the police, nothing. They weren't allowed to call out. So when somebody was aggressive, when somebody was attacked, all of these things that were happening in her other locations, the staff members were directed specifically not to share that with anybody outside of those 4 walls.
So you made a couple comments in regards to your staff. You said you believe in your staff.
I do.
You said we shouldn't take away their skills. You said
You shouldn't minimize their skills.
Don't minimize their skills. You said a lot of them are EMTs or
No,
fire.
I said they'd like to be.
want to be.
They want to be an
So
EMT.
I can tell you, I've been a lieutenant paramedic for many years. I can tell you skills are something you acquire. They're not just there.
Yep.
So my question is, what is the training that they're receiving? Because I can tell you, I'm an EMT, I'm a paramedic. That doesn't mean I know shit about being a security or a chaperone. These aren't kids we're chaperoning. So what do you
So
have
let
in
me
place
tell you
for
what the
their training?
onboarding looks like.
Yes.
All right. So we have a 3-day onboarding.
3 days.
It was so minimal as to be a joke on the requirements of individuals that we were supposed to trust the community's life and livelihood in.
The sheriff had gone to one of the community events and started realizing there's some stuff missing here. So he invited the DOC and the Department of Social Health Services to it, and they rejected it, citing that there were threats made to them and their employees and to their contractors. And I immediately was like, what in the world kind of threat could have possibly justified them canceling their invitation and saying, nah, we're not going to be a part of this?
This was supposed to be their meeting. I was like, listen, I'm kind of caught in the middle because people are looking to the sheriff to help them, but this is all occurring at the state level. And, when they wrote the laws about LRAs, they made them very impenetrable. I mean, counties can't create ordinances, cities can't create municipal code. You can't get around it, right? I mean, they made a pretty bulletproof legal doctrine as far as like, we're putting these people in the community. So the big thing, right, was like, okay, if this is happening, if it's full steam ahead, at least come be accountable to the people of Thurston County, especially those in the local area who are being impacted by this, because people really feel unsafe about it, right? So I said, I will host it. You will come sit at the table. I will sit at the table with you. I will answer any local law enforcement questions, response times, how many deputies, our procedure, RCW that is applicable to me. But I need you at the table as the subject matter expert to really correct what a lot of that company said that was incorrect. And I think if you could just get up there and talk about some of this stuff, will people be happy? Absolutely not. Will they come away with at least a better understanding? I think so. So invited them, and then got the last minute, oh, we can't make it kind of thing, which was unfortunate. Said it was death threats, and I started kind of getting a hint a couple days before, because we started getting emails like, what's security going to look like there? And I'm like, people at Tenino are mad. They're not going to kill you. Most of these people have families and kids, and they go to the local school. That's why they're showing up. That's the very things that make them law-abiding citizens are why they're so mad about this. And like, they're not going to kill you. But in that event, I think we had like 10 armed deputy sheriffs and Tenino police officers that were there. I'm like, you're getting more security than most people in the area. That's a bigger security profile than Governor Inslee's Washington State Patrol Unit. Like, I don't know how else to make you feel more secure. Like, we don't have the Secret Service here.
They essentially fabricated death threats so that they could escape accountability with the community.
When the Department of Corrections gave me their list of documents, their response, they have no record of threats. When the Department of Social Health Services gave their response, what they finally gave me was a screenshot of a Facebook thread with someone saying something along the lines of, well, maybe we should get hired at this facility in Tenino and we should poison people. So that gives no reason for the DSHS or DOC staff members to pretend like somebody was threatening them to back out of this.
I think they just kind of massaged that around a little bit and made something out of it that it was not, and used that as justification to skip the meeting.
So, if you haven't figured my style out yet, I don't write speeches. We just kind of go off the whim. And so far, it's produced a lot of great organic conversation out in the community. And then DOC and DSHS backed out of today's meeting, which tells me that there's no real review that's going into this. And I said, you guys owe it to our community to come out here and answer some questions. You just do. And then we got the second email, which was, hey, we're a little concerned about the security. We're a little concerned about the structure of how this is going to go down. And I'm like, well, how I plan on having it go down is that you will sit up here on a table, I will stand here at the podium, and people will raise their hand. That's usually how these things work. The second thing was the security, and I said, well, how many deputies do we have here tonight? We've got sergeants, we've got deputies, we've got a chief, we have an undersheriff, lieutenant. We have lieutenant, we have Tenino police chief, we have Tenino police officers, and at no point in time did they offer to bring any of their state troopers or any of their security.
And that's the kind of stuff that I'm tired of seeing, that I think all of us are tired of seeing. Like, give us the facts, give us the truth. Stop going behind our backs and saying ridiculous stuff. The difference between potentially dangerous and dangerous is the act. Any one of us are potentially dangerous sitting here.
In the job application, there was the word was out there that, well, we're looking for young people. We'll give you 3 days training, and we would hope that no women apply.
McNeil Island is level 3, sexually violent, worst of the worst, according to DSHS. So we're not talking about like the guy who got drunk and peed in front of a playground on accident and ended up going to McNeil Island and now he's locked up there forever. She just described someone who raped a 6-year-old boy and girl.
Don't surprise any more neighborhoods. Don't put any more children or women in danger of assault.
A real fear for Paul Hagan, who lives just across the street from a less restrictive alternative, LRA community housing in Enumclaw.
Were you ever made aware that this was happening?
Nope.
An issue many say has been their biggest concern.
The state of Washington has unilaterally made a decision in Olympia through the state government, through DSHS, to site this facility here on the plateau.
We are a red city in a blue county, a very blue county. When it comes to decisions being made up in Seattle, being made up in King County, we tend to disagree with them down here. And the pandemic was when the council decided to take a look into whether or not they could potentially leave the county. That kind of gives, I think, a pretty good idea of how people around here feel about the general area where they live. And where their values are.
When I was in the legislature, I worked on education issues and technology and energy issues. Sexually violent predators and less restrictive alternatives and McNeil Island were never on my radar, and I had to learn about them from other representatives and people who knew a whole lot more than I did about the subject until now. Until this home was placed in our community and a sexually violent predator was moved here on January 18th of 2023. And we didn't find out about it until a couple weeks after somebody was already living here. There is a school bus stop that is about 230 feet from this property, and they cannot site a facility within 500 feet of where children congregate. So check one. Not in compliance. So the fact that the state just overrides their own rules and laws and shoves these people into our neighborhoods, it's frightening. I mean, this originally was a residential home until it turned into a facility. And they took out this home loan, for the house they bought for $900,000, and so they took out a home loan for $630,000 from Caliber Home Loans. So my question was, how do you take out a residential home loan on a piece of commercial property? You're running a commercial business out of here. So I contacted the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions, and I just asked them the question, can you get a residential home loan for a commercial facility? Well, they referred that to the Attorney General's office and the King County Prosecutor's office for potential mortgage fraud. So Caliber Home Loans found out about it and called the loan. They owned a rental home down in Tacoma, and they sold that. Apparently have paid this off.
This is the most animated and angry I've seen Enumclaw in my 8 years here. And it makes me wonder, how far my community is going to be taking this.
Bring that down to your local neighborhood, because those are the people that are going to have to deal with that. And you're going to be over there watching your kid. You're going to constantly, how do you know the kid's playing in the backyard and this guy's leering out the back window or something?
Trying to convince people and explain to them, no, this happens. And you can watch them trying to, and it's too hard to believe it. So I think people choose not to believe it or believe that it happens because it's too hard, and it puts you in this whole other world of understanding we have some terrible people doing some terrible things, and what do you do about it?
Why in the world are we putting that burden on a neighborhood, putting that on a community? It's not their problem. It's the state's problem to make sure that this person that was incarcerated, that they said after his incarceration, his mandatory prison sentence was over, he or she is still too violent to release into the public.
The one that emotionally affected me to where I had to leave work was a level 3 sex offender who liked like 5, 6-year-old girls. He had befriended a female who was single mom, who had a 5-year-old daughter. And she ended up disclosing that he had played all these games with her and sexually assaulted her. She didn't know what it was, but, again, licking the vagina. But what got me the most on that case, too, was that as I'm having to look at all this child pornography, because he really liked it, and that's one thing, he was taking pictures of these girls, these little girls, as he's abusing them. And you're having, as a cop, as an investigator, you're having to look at all this horrific stuff. But I don't want to get emotional. My daughter was the same age and she looked the same, and I'm not an emotional person either, but I had to leave.
DOC and DSHS at times get on their high horses. They feel like they know more than the people in the community, and in this case they weren't listening to the people in the community. It's sad because, and hard to understand, because the community here had legislators, former legislators, and people that knew what they were talking about, writing and telling them that the House was not in compliance with the law. But they ignored all of that.
Apparently, Enumclaw residents have threatened to burn down the town hall if we had a meeting there. Apparently, we're seeing similar outrage up there.
We find out that a couple weeks later, they told us no. They basically no-call, no-showed for us, but then did this for Enumclaw. And for us, instead, what we got was a webinar.
Now, just some housekeeping items. We will not be using the hand-raised function during this event. We will be taking questions through the Q&A function only.
It's startling to look at the refusal by DOC and DSHS to pay attention to the community. Even at one point, I think the SWAT team was called out to keep the community in check.
My name is Chris Knutson. I'm a detective with the King County Sheriff's Office. I work in the Registered Sex Offender Unit. Up here on the stage with me is my supervisor, Sergeant Jason Escobar, also of the Registered Sex Offender Unit of the Sheriff's Office. So this is Stephen Knapp. He has to register because he has convictions for child molestation in the first degree. He has a conviction for attempted statutory rape of a first degree. The name of that law has changed. It's now called attempted rape of a child in the first degree. That's what it's listed as on the website. And then he also has a conviction further back for communication with a minor for immoral purposes. Mr. Knapp, a lot of his victims were people he had little or no connection with.
The owner of the house knew that he had given, polygraph tests for the state. There's a conflict of interest, and it should have been known by both the state and by Minich. He had actually given polygraph tests to Knapp, the offender that was involved in the case. So you have somebody given a polygraph to figure out whether they're telling the truth or not, and actually, if he says, well, they should be sent back to the Special Commitment Center, he's going to lose a client in his home. So that's definitely a conflict.
So you were aware that he owned the polygraph company that does the DOC contracts when you placed Mr. Predator Knapp into the home?
Okay, so through the contract, he is not allowed to polygraph anybody that would be in the residence, nor is he allowed to have anybody come to the residence that he would have done any polygraphs on. So we made sure to review that, recognizing that he did have a contract so that we wouldn't have a conflict of interest. So we were aware of that. So thank you for that. What I want to say is that the... Am I aware of what?
This week, answer it for all them. You got an attorney general opinion. You were so worried, you asked the lawyer if it was legal or not.
Representative.
I had met with some representatives from DSHS and Department of Corrections a few days before the meeting, and this came up. And the department had noted that the arrangement was okay because they had sought an ethics opinion from the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office had given the all clear. And so I knew that not only did they know that this relationship existed, but they were clearly at least sufficiently concerned about the nature of the relationship that they had to ask an ethics lawyer about it.
They said, no one that we have released has ever offended. The guy that you're putting into this house was released, and he did reoffend, like within months of being released.
People relax after a while, and they start thinking, it's okay for that person to leave. Well, nothing happened yet, so he's doing okay. And the problem with that is eventually something does happen, and then they wonder, why weren't they monitored?
Knapp still has urges as of July 2022, visually targeting 12 to 14-year-old girls.
It's really up to DOC and DSHS to make sure that they're giving proper information to the judge.
The investigation doesn't even mention the closest elementary school, which is Westwood Elementary. It doesn't mention the playgrounds, the churches, the libraries, where children congregate. Most of those locations in this report, a quick Google search will tell you that.
DSHS is conscious of its potential liability, but it doesn't reduce it in the right way. You reduce it by making sure that you're not putting an offender who has molested 500 children close to children, not by trying to make a false report about where the playgrounds are, or where the bus stops are, where the elementary schools are.
Some moms were standing up and saying, but there's a school bus stop right near the front of this house. What about the school bus stop?
Now the school bus stops, the windows, and I'm going to simplify this, and y'all might just say, the onus of keeping your kids safe is on you.
That was an unfortunate comment. I will say that
And the whole place erupted, and 2 weeks later she was fired from KSARC.
During his October 11, 2022 session, Knapp reported one incident of noticing teenagers on the street when a school was being released.
You can't relax your vigilance on a sex offender, and especially when you put him out in the community close to kids. I mean, this person that had molested over 500 kids by his own admission, and you put him out there, and then you stop, or you reduce the supervision, and you're playing with dynamite.
It has seemed from afar watching you, and I have watched you for a long time, that it was almost as though you were dedicating your work to Diane.
Not just for Diane, for other young women around, and that type of offender in particular, and an agency that is supposed to have the responsibility for these people's supervision and how they operated. They didn't operate well.
Corrections head Amos Reed said he has to find ways to release inmates into society, that nearly every inmate now in the system will someday be outside prison walls.
The legislature sets up this system, and as secretary and my predecessors and I under tremendous pressure to move people out into the community. We do the best that we can, but there is no system and no state that can guarantee with anybody coming in whether they're going to commit another crime or not.
In April 1984, Attorney General Ken Eikenberry asked Senate leaders to restore sovereign immunity. Under that doctrine, the state and public officials can do no wrong and they cannot be sued. The legislature tabled it. Then last March, the office repeated the request. Again, the legislature said no. Maybe the Attorney General will plead that he pursued sovereign immunity to save the state money.
It was a Monday, a September evening in 1988, when Diane Belashotas left the office of the advertising agency where she worked in Pioneer Square. Carrying her briefcase and her umbrella, she followed her usual route. She walked down Occidental, went east on Washington toward the garage where she parked her car. It's the kind of area that makes you look over your shoulder if you're alone. Seedy, not as well traveled as the bustling streets of the square. But for Diane, these were scenes that she passed every day. This is the Yesler Street garage where Diane parked, down on a lower level. When she walked into the garage on that autumn evening, a killer was waiting. That inmate was Gene Raymond Kane, a sexual psychopath who had been serving time for assault and attempted rape. After 12 years in prison, he'd been assigned to the Reynolds Work Release Center. On the day of Diane's murder, he left the center for work at 7 a.m. Then he called in sick to his employer and disappeared. Not long after Diane's body was found, Kane was picked up at this mall in Yakima, the same mall where he had stalked his earlier victims. He was caught siphoning gas, and he was still driving Diane's blood-stained car.
The media just ignored it for a long time. There's a cultural element that I can't understand, and it goes much deeper to the cultural values in Washington State.
Diane was working in Pioneer Square for an ad agency. She had been a communications major from WSU, and was going to her car one night and was confronted with this person in a parking garage, and he attacked her there, murdered her, took her car, her body in the car, and dumped her body in South Seattle. And of course, no one knew, anything about that. And in fact, didn't find her body for a week. And I just thinking the other day on some of these things, how grateful you are that they found her. Isn't that something to be grateful for? But in any event, that's what more or less started all this, because I started looking into the whole issue of who this person was, where he was living, how he got here.
He was a well-known offender,
Yeah.
a sex offender who was on work release.
He
Is
was
that right?
classified a sexual psychopath who was in a work release program in downtown Seattle, which didn't make a great deal of sense to me.
He could walk around the streets all day long.
Which is exactly what he did.
May 20th. Started out as a regular day with the regular rules. But I do remember that it was time for him to be coming home from a last bike ride. About 8 o'clock, I had sent out the mental message for him to come home. He didn't get home that night. And I made the phone call no parent wants to, asking 911 to hook me up to someone who could help me with my missing son.
Another horrific case that happened down in Tacoma. Can you
That's
tell
right.
us a little about that?
And in that particular case, the individual involved there, had been in lockdown till literally his day of release. So when you looked at the circumstances there, you realized there wasn't a good way to handle these people. Anyway, this person was released. He abducted a 7-year-old kid in a park in Tacoma, severed his penis, would probably have killed him if someone hadn't heard them. And that was the other thing. This was two, just one on top of each other.
And both of these offenders were the kind of offenders that everybody in prison knew this was going to happen. This is no surprise.
Not only that, but these are the kinds that everyone is horrified to hear about.
Yeah,
that they're actually walking around.
It's every parent's nightmare.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely right.
It should have been Diane's horrible death that should have been the major trigger that this was, but this became a huge trigger. Here's a little boy, but what happened after that, in terms of the program that we did, I think really catalyzed, brought together all of the issues that astonished people. For example, I received a manila envelope with no return address, and it had drawings inside that Earl Schreiner had written, and I believe to this day it was somebody at the Department of Corrections where he was housed. And the drawings showed a mobile van and equipment that he had inside, scissors and vice and other horrifying. Looked like it was the Marquis de Sade that he was planning to use against children. And he made no bones about it in these documents. What happened then, and the reason I got that was because the judge actually let him out after 30 days. He went walking the streets again. And I thought the judge should have been held in contempt, if you could do that, or at least been recalled for a horrifying decision with evidence that this individual was not suited to be in society. Everyone has compassion for a person wanting to have a second chance and wanting to be rehabilitated. But even with Earl Schreiner, it wasn't as if he had conscious knowledge and awareness of what he was doing in the sense that he was rational. Obviously, there was something psychotically wrong with him. And so you don't have to call him a bad motive person in order to house him. You don't have to even put him in prison. You put him someplace where he's away from the public, which was what we argued.
Yet the response from the bureaucracy, Department of Corrections at that time, 20 years ago, was, hey, we did everything we could do.
Yeah. His time was up, we had to release him. And those were not good answers, particularly to parents.
The public was pretty upset by that.
The public was upset. I get very disturbed when they talk about revenge and all this stuff. We wanted to make changes because we knew full well there was more like that there.
There were many more in prison who were just like those two.
More that were going to come out with no good way of managing them.
So we went down to Olympia and had rallies and things like that, and then when this material came public, when I went on the air with it, with these pictures, it just put the whole thing together, and people realized this is a monster.
So ultimately, the noise from the people reached the governor, Booth Gardner at the time.
Booth Gardner at the time.
Did you meet with Booth Gardner?
Oh yes, many times. And in fact, the turning point of this whole thing was a march, if you will, or a drive to get to Olympia, with people actually shouting on the steps, "We want Booth." A lot of people.
What more important value is there than protecting children? So I went on, and if it didn't work, then we move on. Then the audience wouldn't have wanted it, but they stayed with it. They built on it, and people would call and give their suggestions to how we do it. I think it was the audience suggestion that we have businesses all over the state, have big boxes that the people could put their tennis shoes in with the notes from the children. And so the audience, there was always an audience participation process, and that's how it happened. We started it, and the audience loved it.
Children are the most important resource we have in this state. Governor Gardner, we need to put in the death penalty now for all men who sexually abuse kids.
And the upshot of all this is that he decided to form a blue ribbon task force.
The important thing was you had a lot of people who represented victims.
Well, that's what I think really made this different, and I think really made it work. There were 6 or 7 of us who had been involved, had been crime victims, if you will, different kinds, and who were on there, who weren't interested in taking the usual answers as the answer. There had to be something better.
So the task force produced a report, but instead of just going up on a shelf and gathering dust, this report became landmark legislation.
It worked. It really worked.
Members of the Community Protection Task Force face these issues with enormous courage and developed recommendations that will be strong medicine in the battle against the disease of violence. When Norm Mailing, Helen Harlow, and Ida Balashoditz come to you and ask for your support of the Community Protection Bill, you can only give them one answer.
Some of the big things that came out of it were tougher sentences.
We do have tougher sentences. We do have registration. We do have notification.
So that when a sex offender is released, that the people in the community are aware.
Today, you can get on your computer and find out exactly where they're living within, a block radius of where you live.
The other thing that was a big innovation here, first in the nation, was the civil commitment law.
That's right, which says you can keep someone indefinitely after they've served their sentence if they're deemed too dangerous to be free.
They get a jury trial.
Oh yes, absolutely, a civil
they,
trial. It's not another criminal trial, but it's a civil trial. And that went to every level of court in this country, up to and including the Supreme Court.
And it's been found to be constitutional.
And it was upheld, which in our heart of hearts we knew it would be. And it's functioning now. Unfortunately, there's quite a few people out there.
I've been under this law for 7 years, and I still haven't figured out if I have a mental abnormality or not. When you use the term sexual violent predator, you're doing the very thing we're taught in treatment not to do to our victims. You're objectifying people. I don't believe I have a mental abnormality, and I hate the term sexually violent predator because it casts upon an individual a scarlet letter that he is branded with the rest of his life and makes it so difficult for him to adjust in the very community that you want to keep safe. I'm in a community where I'm succeeding because I don't live under that shadow of that label. I am a sex offender. I'm getting help for it. I recognized a long time ago I have a problem. I'm a 2-time loser. I don't want to lose again because it's life forever. You have in place criminal laws that keep people locked up.
The Department of Corrections is headed by Secretary Joe Lehman.
Right.
When he was appointed by Governor Locke a few years ago, you had some fairly critical things.
There's some things that are basic to corrections, and I think supervision upon release is one of those. You don't lose a sex offender who's on supervision. You just don't.
Mr. Secretary, can you assure the public that under the new system that we won't have the tragedies we've had in the past?
Absolutely not. And nobody in the criminal justice system around the country would ever be so foolish as to say that we can guarantee that people won't act out their evil motives or thoughts. It's just foolishness.
My first baby case, and I've had other cases with babies, not too many because babies can't tell you, and usually it's just the suspect and the victim. And They don't know it happened, you know, they can't tell you. So those cases will never get reported unless somebody videos it or you have somebody walk in like Roxanne did. It's horrific because it's a baby, and it stood out because I did a lot of work to make sure I had collected all the evidence I could, because obviously of who the suspect's father was. It was a high-profile case. I'm going to get you to tell me what happened within the authority of the law so it can be used against you in a court of law, so this baby can be protected, and you'll be forced into treatment if you're really not willing to do it, because most people say they are, but you know, it's all manipulation. So at the end of the day, we needed to make sure that this case was investigated properly so the right things could happen in the courtroom, which still apparently didn't, you know. SOSA was like what they offered everybody that had no prior sexual assault conviction. So to me, it was just part of one of the options available for prosecutors that was used a lot. So at the time, I did not think so. And I remember that at first, Mr. Lehman was going to get some ridiculous sentence, 6 months. And I was so proud of Roxanne when she went to the media with her advocate, with their assistance of supporting her and blowing it up and saying, this is not okay. 6 months for a man who sexually assaults a baby is not okay. Put pressure on the judge, and then they changed it.
Okay. In 1999, in recognition of the very point you're making, the legislature passed the Offender Accountability Act. Now, I don't know to what extent you're familiar with it, but the whole nexus of that, from my perspective, as a person responsible for the agency, was to create a policy that allowed us to allocate the resources to the high risk. Now,
to do triage.
Right, exactly, because we didn't do that before, because under a just desserts model, it was a sanction-based system. You simply monitored all the conditions. We have 57,000 offenders under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections in the communities. We don't have sufficient resources to supervise them all the same way. So the Offender Accountability Act, which was passed in 1999, and which goes into effect, went into effect in 2000, allows us to allocate some resources. Now, but this is important. We are doubling the amount of time spent on high-risk offenders in this. We are collaborating with law enforcement and citizens much more intimately in this process. But, Dwayne, there is no guarantee that offenders will not reoffend. Dangerous people. You could be under my supervision. I could do everything I can with the new act, and there's still no guarantee. There is no active supervision. I have 27,000 offenders under that jurisdiction, and for which we are not budgeted to do anything other than that. So our position, from the very beginning going to the court, was, as a matter of law, we did not have duty to supervise.
I got started because there was a story in my local newspaper, the Peninsula Gateway, about a girl in my neighborhood who had been raped. The mother had told the story in the Peninsula Gateway, and the writer went into all the sex offender laws at that time, or did a really in-depth piece on not only this family case, but on the SOSA law and the sex offender laws in general, and it really got me upset. And then when I found out Teresa, the mother who told the story in the Gateway, was my neighbor, I had just had this home built, so I didn't really know know many people. I just felt terrible. It just ate at me. And then I wrote a letter to the editor on behalf of my neighborhood in support of Teresa and sent it to the editor, and that's all I thought was ever going to happen. I just wanted her to know someone recognized the injustice of the case. What caught me the most was that the perpetrator in this case came from a high-powered Gig Harbor family who had money and resources, and the daughter came from a family with no power. And so that was the first part, the tilt in the balance toward the powerful versus the victim's family. You know, mom was an electrician, and she wasn't connected to anybody in this community, but the parents of the perpetrator were. And they used that power to get a reduced sentence. They used the judge, and they used a pastor of the biggest church in this community to write a sentencing affidavit to the judge. And so when I read all that, I'm just like, this tilt doesn't seem like justice to me, and she deserves someone to at least recognize it.
I am Kyle's father, and Kyle is my only son. This trouble has caused him to reevaluate his relationship with God.
I've known Kyle for approximately 6 months. He seems to be truly remorseful for his actions and willing to do whatever is necessary to avoid a repetition of what appears to be a one-time incident.
I have always found Kyle to be a person of integrity. Being a small business owner is not always easy. Kyle has accepted full responsibility for his actions and his business.
The standard sentence in this case being 7 to 9 years, and him getting basically 60 days in county jail, followed by a community-based treatment. It just was so awful to me.
I begged for no Sosa. I begged for no. This is what I gave to Judge Larkin. Begging, the whole thing is no Sosa.
I wonder, has the judicial system ever taken into consideration the fact that the victims did not have an opportunity for an alternative sentence to the malicious intrusion upon them? If Sosa and the remaining 4 months in county is a punishment, that is very disturbing to us. I do have a request, a prison term in lieu of the Sosa program.
Pat Lance blew me off, said the session's about to start. Her staffer called me and said she doesn't have time for this. I said, did you read this story? This is in her district. You know, this doesn't bother you at all about this case or whatever. Anyway, then I called Lois, and she said, how quickly can you get in here? Do you have an idea for a bill? And so I helped draft House Bill 2400, the Child Protection Act, and away we went. The bill drops and goes to a committee, and Al O'Brien was the chair of the House Judiciary Committee where this bill goes to for consideration of a hearing. And Al O'Brien was a former cop, had a background in law enforcement. And when Lois said he's not going to give this bill a hearing, I said, oh really? Yes, he is.
From what I know of your personal stand on it, Mr. O'Brien, you're worried about the financial part. And you said not to repeat anything, but, you know, you can't put a price on my daughter.
I agree.
I went to a hearing, or a meeting, with the Department of Corrections counselor that is going to be overseeing his sentence, okay? That lady fell asleep 3 times during that interview. We were there for over an hour. And now, the judge took her recommendation to give him Sosa. Now, you tell me, if you fall asleep 3 times, are you paying attention?
I was never looking for perfection, but I was looking for enhancements to laws that protect children, because the term that was used was the sex offender bill, acrimonious sex offender bill. O'Brien didn't want to pass it because nobody wants to be labeled soft on sex offenders. But they weren't going to pass this bill unless they got pressure. And they said, you know, Jim, the Sosa program is important. You're trying to get rid of this. What about these kinds of cases and these kinds of cases? And I said, You're not going to convince me. So, and they said some of these people only have one victim, or some of them are interfamily where there's multiple childhood victims, but they're in the same family. And I said, do you hear yourself, what you just said? That makes it better. I talked to Ida, who enlisted her help because of her work with Helen Harlow. I just found her to be a warm, caring, loving woman who lost her daughter in the most vicious and awful way, and she wanted to make changes. Anyway, so I called Ida and said, can you help me reenact the tennis shoe brigade, because this will be powerful. It'll bring up how this all started. Obviously, Helen was tenacious because she's the one who did the tennis shoe brigade. She's the one who set up bins and collected all these shoes and dumped them on the governor's doorsteps. I, worked with some of the Safeway stores and some of the grocery stores in the area and set up bins, and we did the same thing. Now, I didn't collect nearly as many because I didn't have nearly the time, but it re-engaged the media, it reinforced that we weren't giving up, and it brought back memories for the media and the legislature of how this all started.
A defense attorney cannot go to a judge and say, I want to get my guy into the program now, because it's the prosecutor that holds the key. The prosecutors told us that had we adopted the underlying bill, the initial bill, fewer convictions would have resulted, fewer people would have gone to prison, fewer people would have gone into treatment, and more victims would have stayed out there being violated.
The victims' families that came to me have been in almost daily contact with me. And I have asked them, how far would you be willing to go to compromise on the position that we started with? And they have told me that they would be willing to compromise in some areas, and the lesser crimes they would be willing to compromise. But these Class A felonies, they wanted and they believed that it was just and right for these criminals to spend time behind bars. So it's disappointing to me tonight that won't necessarily be the case. These are two strikes offenses, folks. These are the most serious of crimes against children. And it really does, I am very sad to think that I am not going to be able to tell these victims and their families that we have done something to assure that the result in their cases would have been different.
My original bill would have gotten rid of the SOSA program. We didn't get that. But we got enhancements to rules around SOSA so that the net impact was that less people will qualify for SOSA program than would have before House Bill 2400. But had my bill in its original version passed, we would have had mandatory minimum prison sentences for all rape and molestation of a child, any child, and the SOSA program would have been eliminated.
So, I find myself often, saying, if I was stuck on an island with one risk assessment tool, that would be Static 99R. If you have 100 guys lined up against your wall, which guy is this guy most like? I think all of us who spend time in court know that judges and juries glaze over as soon as you start talking about numbers, that it doesn't seem at times like there's a way we can win this, aside from being the best speaker in the room. Sometimes it goes back to whoever is the most powerful speaker and who's willing to say whatever is going to most appeal to the judge or the jury.
And if you can get people into those ranges, you can say, this is no different from people who you're not considering to be, quote, sex offenders or not considering to be at high risk. So like if it's a parole decision, what's the rate of sexual reoffending among people with no sex offense history on parole? And I'm sure it's a number, and it's not going to be tiny. It's going to be a real number. And you can say this guy's down into that range. He's not indistinguishable.
It is a very highly sexist rating system towards girls. Points of deviancy are granted for different things. There is 1 point given for each male victim that is assaulted. There are 0 points of deviancy for all females.
Dr. Wohlert changed Static 99R, removing the age statistic category, calling it MATS 1. This helped him when he was getting paid as an expert defense witness because his findings and theories helped those faced with civil commitment present an alternative theory. But the risk assessment community has been fighting back, and so have judges in his case.
MATS 1 is not appropriate to use for applied risk assessment.
On several occasions, I have written responses indicating that he is misapplying my research or misstating the data. Some statements are debatable, and some statements are demonstrably false. He fails to distinguish between peer-supported professional opinion and his own speculations.
Dr. Wollert's methods of assessing the impact of age on recidivism are not generally accepted in the community of experts who conduct SVP evaluations.
Dr. Wollert's opinions are biased and not credible.
The court found Wohlert to be a very passionate person about his own theories and opinions. However, his opinions and testimony were inconsistent, contradictory, generalized, and conclusionary.
Wollert's reports are a gross misinterpretation of risk. It's mumbo-jumbo.
Yet Wohlert was allowed to present his theoretical testimony in over 50 civil commitment trials, some resulting in hung juries or outright acquittals. Wohlert attacked the Seattle Times reporting as biased, claiming that his critics were all competitors, including the Static 99 creator, R. Carl Hansen.
We have a responsibility not to do good assessments, but also to communicate the scientific basis of the assessments that we do.
Kevin Coe walked into the courtroom today hoping the jury would set him free.
As the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Kevin Coe is a sexually violent predator, answer, yes.
But he didn't react or even blink after learning he will likely spend the rest of his life locked up with other sex offenders. During the trial, prosecutors claimed Coe attacked 33 women during a 15-year crime spree. He served 25 years in prison for one of the rapes. And as he was about to be released, the state filed papers arguing Coe should be committed to a treatment center because a mental illness keeps him from controlling his violent urges. Coe testified at the trial that he is not a threat.
What do you think your risk is to reoffend in the future?
To offend?
To offend in the future, yes.
0.
But the jury found him to be too dangerous to be set free. Shelley Monahan was one of Coe's victims.
After 29 years, it's finally over. It's been a long, hard-fought battle and something that so many of the victims have wanted for such a very long time. And finally today, justice has been served, and our community is going to be a lot safer because of it.
Dr. Theodore Donaldson served as Coe's expert witness. Donaldson told the jury, quote, "Coe's just into kinky sex." A forensic psychologist working solely for defense attorneys, Donaldson has never met a sex offender that met the civil commitment threshold, including Coe. The Seattle Times examined several of Donaldson's psychological evaluations, finding that they were copy and paste jobs, using the same material for different cases, changing the words child molester to rapist. One of Donaldson's clients was acquitted in 2003, Curtis Shane Thompson. Donaldson's testimony was that Thompson wasn't a sexually violent predator. Quote, "He's simply a sex criminal without having a mental disorder that causes him to prefer non-consensual sex." Within a year, fully released into the community, Curtis Shane Thompson had attacked 3 women, raping 1.
There has to be another judgment about the applicability to this individual. And generally, the risk scale score is your best judgment.
This brings into question the Special Commitment Center evaluators of the static scoring tool. Some of the psychologists are sex offenders themselves. In the 1990s, one of the psychologists, Dr. James McGuire, had his Alaskan license pulled after sleeping with a patient. Yet he was hired to work at the Special Commitment Center. In the early 2000s, it was Dr. Thomas Smith who was fired for sexually harassing staff, while also advising the SCC residents to seek out prostitutes as a way of sexually coping with their urges. But the biggest issue was, and always has been, Dr. Leslie Siebert, who ran the Special Commitment Center for nearly 2 decades during the 2000s. Siebert also testified at Kevin Coe's civil commitment trial in 2008, claiming that Coe was suffering from depression. Siebert was fired from his private Yakima practice in 1999, after it was discovered that he slept with 2 patients, including a schizophrenic patient who tried to kill herself, leaving on her nightstand a 100-minute audio tape of phone messages from Siebert. The state's medical board suspended Siebert's license for 5 years, but allowed him to be hired as a medical director at the Special Commitment Center. The medical board said that he was only a threat to women, but now he's in charge of scoring all of the SCC residents for risk. How is there no cognitive bias when a sex offender is rating another sex offender for deviancy? And even if those being evaluated are deemed of high risk, what measures prevent the evaluator from still clearing these sex offenders from the Special Commitment Center to leave the island into an LRA?
I think Western State Hospital is in a place where it is okay to transition its leader. I think I had a role there in helping secure the program and get it moving in the right direction.
According to Pierce County court documents, the incident happened at Visions Adult Family Home. Investigators say 54-year-old John Quitorio was arguing with a 57-year-old when Quitorio punched the victim using a mug as a fist, striking him in the eye. The victim was taken to Madigan Army Medical Center, where he later died.
I'm concerned about the people who live in those homes as well as the neighbors around them.
State Senator Steve O'Ban says he believes Quitorio did not belong in the Visions facility, part of his ongoing fight with DSHS.
But they've been continuing to put people with a violent past into these adult family homes that are designed for seniors and people with severe disabilities, not for people with violent pasts.
Well, the city of Lakewood's been loudly sounding the alarm for years now, and DSHS has been tone deaf.
Lakewood Mayor Don Anderson says the city found Quitorio was previously committed to Western State Medical Hospital and believes the adult family home was not prepared to safely house him.
I now have fear about where I live, where I used to not.
Becky Hoyt and some of her neighbors are speaking out about a house on Viking Way, across the street from where the school bus picks up kids.
This is one of the designated bus stops right here. And there's the home.
The less restrictive alternatives are known as an LRA, and the state's Department of Social and Health Services contracted the running of the home out to West Sound Support Services, LLC. The private company was sent a letter from Jim Bolger, interim director of Kitsap County's Department of Community Development. It states the way the property is being used is in violation of the county zoning code, and they must cease use of the property as an LRA with enhanced services.
There were some people in the community that got involved and learned that there was all of a sudden a house that had many sex offenders, and not just regular sex offenders, but people that have been deemed to be predators and so violent and such a threat that they continue to pose a risk, so they can't be out and about with society. That started this really long process of trying to uncover and understand all of the nuances of civil commitment in this state and all the layers that go with that, which was a pretty difficult road to travel, because the one voice that's not represented is that of communities.
The Growth Management Act requires any time that you develop any type of property that has community interest, you must gain or at least seek buy-in from the local community. The state agencies found that that was too hard to do. As a matter of fact, they just walked out of several community meetings in the beginning.
You'd be better off if you spoke into the mics.
Okay. We will sit then.
Good evening. My name is Julia Crabb. I'm the Community Programs Administrator at the Special Commitment Center.
And I'm Dr. Elena Lopez. I'm the Chief of Resident Treatment at the Special Commitment Center. We have a brief statement for you this evening. So on behalf of the Department of Social and Health Services, we're here this evening to invite you and others who are interested to learn more about our program and the treatment we provide to individuals who've committed sexual offenses. This will occur in an upcoming educational forum. If you are interested, please sign up on the sheet near the doorway. Actually, I'm going to have Kelly Van Holtz as our media manager, and she's in the back of the room right now. I know some of you may have signed in thinking that was for this meeting. This is actually for your interest in an upcoming educational forum that we're willing to provide. There's also some reading materials on the less restrictive alternative process that's right near the doorway. Details about the forum will be forthcoming once we have an idea of the level of interest from those in the audience tonight or others you know that might be interested in learning more about what we do. As for tonight and the purposes of this meeting, we won't be speaking specifically about the individual who's released to the community.
However, DSHS, we do want to acknowledge your concern regarding the decisions on how our residents come out to the community. We do point that it is a legal process and that a court determines where a resident moves and when. And Department of Social and Health Services. Did you hear any of that?
Yeah, okay. Better now.
So I just, DSHS would like to acknowledge the concern that you have about one of our residents coming to your community. We also want to point out that the process for residents.
They weren't there to help community members understand or to feel heard. And I think if this is happening, that's the least that they could do. Communities quickly inform themselves. It's an arduous process, and I saw it here and I see it over and over in other communities where this is happening and people are informed. No one needs or want to have someone come in and give them a presentation all about civil commitment and LRA placement. At the point that there's a meeting, the people in the room already have that knowledge. So the fact that they're still running with that and they're still trying to shove that down people's throats, rather than saying, okay, we'll show up, we'll listen, we'll hear you, we actually care about your concerns of community safety. DSHS was there and they introduced themselves and they said, we're actually not prepared to talk today. So if you're interested, we could come back and we can provide a presentation to inform you about this. You can sign up at the back. And they literally got up and walked out.
Sure. Okay, sure. Good evening, Poswell community.
It made it very clear how little regard or concern there was for communities or communities that are just learning that this even exists or is a possibility, or that they, would maybe have to live with it. I mean, it was absolutely insane. It's even more insane to me that they're actually continuing with the same storyline.
There were multiple violations at the Viking Way House. Level 3 sex offenders were walking around on the trails for miles around the house without their GPS units on. They were aggressive towards staff. Even those violating terms were kept at the home and not sent back to the island.
It is a cash cow. You have on-site monitoring, and those people are supposed to report any kind of incidences or violations to DOC or to the sex offender treatment provider. But that's kind of a conflict of interest, given that if they do that, and if it warrants that a judge is going to remove the person from this LRA placement, all of a sudden that money goes away. And of course, they're going to get another one. There's always a pipeline, right? But there's going to be a gap in how long it takes for that to happen. There's been a lot of talk that Senate Bill 5163 created these placements or allowed them. There's a lot of misinformation around that. That wasn't the case. While that bill didn't specifically create community safety that I would like to have seen, there were a number of things in that bill that were necessary and I supported.
And to act like this bill is allowing us to be looser on that is outrageous. I had thought in my original statement that we had come to a maturity level on this issue, that we could talk about this on the floor without getting all worked up and acting like some of us are soft on sex predators and others aren't. Nobody is soft on sex predators. This bill lays out the rules for how people who have constitutional rights will re-engage in society. And if you don't have this bill, you have no rules, and I hope to God you don't get the email I got 2 years ago.
The state agencies were supposed to be direct supervisors of this restriction. The state agency was going to maintain, and still should maintain, supervision of the individuals and actually community safety. And the bill also contemplated that there was going to be full community engagement, and that the community would be made aware and be partners in how these less restrictive alternatives were set up. The agency found that too hard to do, so they stopped doing it altogether.
I was in the, the behavioral health world when it was very formal, and you didn't communicate outside of this therapeutic requirement. And what we see is a softening of that, a more human-centered approach, where the client is in the middle. The Norway premise, or the amend premise, I should say, is really you go to court to be punished, and you go to prison to become better neighbors.
Many asked, why Spokane for a man who had no ties here? Others asked why he's allowed to live 2 blocks from Lewis and Clark High School. That's one of the concerns DOC cited in its investigation. Within a 1-mile radius, there are also bars, playgrounds, daycares, churches, even Pokemon Go Pokestops. According to the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs website, 28 sex offenders live within a 1/4 mile of where I'm standing right now, and 19 of them live at the New Washington Apartments. Court documents say the building owner and a previous manager are convicted sex offenders themselves.
I can't answer specifically who came up with the plan or why or how many other places were looked at. This is the only one that we investigated that we were presented with.
A man who's been a sexual predator since he was 14 years old is coming to Spokane. He has no ties to the community.
Why was he being released, and why, despite having no connections here, does a Western Washington judge think he belongs in Spokane?
The reason they're getting out is nobody wants to pay to house him anymore. This is an economic issue.
Frustrating for both Sheriff Knezovich and Spokane Police Chief Craig Meidel, who say the state wants to save money by emptying McNeil Island. Also, that Spokane property owners are taking big bucks in rent, and judges in other counties are placing them here because many other counties won't allow it.
There is a very small voice at the table of what about the victims? What about the community? And it's just not a loud enough voice yet.
Hey, Lauren McCullum was at the Special Commitment Center on McNeil Island for a long time. I actually visited there for a story in 2006, and the other offenders pointed her out to me then. She was the only woman, and they called her the baby raper.
She was moved way under the radar. The real reason she was released was dollars and cents, because they couldn't house her with the men. She was taking up one whole wing, which was extremely expensive when you've got all these male offenders that need to be there, so they released her. She had not had any kind of treatment that worked. They knew it didn't work. They knew she was dangerous, but they needed the bed space, and it was about dollars and cents. So they didn't want to ship her to anywhere in Western Washington, so they ship her to, the other side of the state, and then kind of out of sight, out of mind. We won't tell anybody that we're moving her, and maybe we can slip it under the radar, and as long as she doesn't reoffend and nobody knows, no harm, no foul.
There are some bad people out there. At some point, they're not bad, they're evil. I'm not going to make excuses for them, and I think I went into it trying to understand how could people do this, and what's the psychology of it. And the bottom line is they're just evil. So when you put so much effort into trying to figure out how to help the suspect, I think they do need help. And the way you help them is confront them with their reality and hold them accountable.
She truly believed that nurturing was sexual. And the only time she was ever touched was sexual. Therefore, she saw that as kind and loving. So when she started babysitting and being around other children, and she was sexual with them, she thought that was a kind and loving thing to do. Her wires were completely crossed. The victim that I met was actually her youngest victim, was 18 months old, and she nearly killed Annie. because as she was molesting her, Annie cried and screamed, and she put a pillow over her face, nearly killed her. So her victims went down to that age, and most of her victims were under the age of being able to verbalize what was going on. So they were pretty young, like 4 and younger. And what Laura would do is she would offer to babysit. And we don't expect that women are going to molest our children. And so she had easy access to lots of kids, and the kids couldn't report her. So we don't really know how many victims she had. Last week I was checking on her, and she has over a dozen Facebook pages. I think she's trolling. I think she's trolling to see, you know, she has different pictures of cats and scenery and pictures of part of her face, or, you know, different parts of her face. And I think she's trolling to see, you know, who she can get a response from. And if it's somebody young, she wants to build a relationship with them. And I think she's looking for somebody to groom.
I don't think people understand recidivism at all, and I think that actually in the Mary Kay Letourneau case, I think more people think that's not a crime because she was a female than, and you still see that.
We don't want to think that women are capable of that kind of gross treatment of children. We want women to be the nurturers. I mean, we don't want to believe dads can do it either, but especially for moms, it's just heartbreaking. You know, she doesn't dress sexual. She looks kind of frumpy and kind of, you know, she's late 50s now. Yeah, she looks very non-threatening. I think that we're just playing with fire there. And the sad thing is, you know, somebody's child will be harmed before we get her back into any kind of incarceration.
The 1090 group agreed to limit their individuals to 5 to come into the lobby and drop off a petition, and then overwhelmed our event team that was on site.
In addition, an unauthorized group of agitators entered the governor's office on Friday making demands.
Whenever you're ready, okay? Okay, we would like to speak to the governor. Yes, of course. Unfortunately, in order to speak with the governor, you do have to do a formal web form online on his website, so that in order for that to go through his scheduler, unfortunately. So we won't be able to speak right here. You stated he's in a meeting. Yes, he is in a meeting right now, and then afterwards he's not able to speak to anyone afterwards. How long is his meeting? I am not sure. I'm not his scheduler.
Was the intrusion into the governor's office Capitol on Thursday evening or on Friday? Or maybe we should just take the mention of which day out and leave it as an unauthorized group of agitators entered the governor's office?
Yep. And we have a petition that has over 2,600 signatures. We are asking him to stop Supreme Living and to not allow this to move forward. He has the authority to do it. We'd like him to consider the public safety as the top priority when changing laws or signing off on laws or any initiatives when releasing sexually violent predators into communities like ours.
Would you like next door? And this is my 11-year-old son, and we live out in the country because I want him to be able to play in his tree house. I want him to be able to play in the woods. I want him to feel safe and have sleep outs on his trampoline. And with these people living right next to us, that is going to change our entire lives and his, growing up situation.
And it's not just the children. My mother-in-law is in her late 80s and lives with 2 other elderly ladies, a mile and a half from this place. I'll be losing sleep.
I'm worried about coming home from work because I do work nights. I come home during late hours. These people are going to figure out my work schedule. They're going to see headlights pulling in, taillights parking. And I don't feel safe walking from my vehicle to the house. And this needs to be addressed.
I would appreciate it. We're more than happy to speak with you guys. I'm more than happy to do that.
I would ask that this is a working office, so if you can please keep the volume down, that would be very much appreciated.
Being part of it with you guys as well today.
Can I just add a comment because I was back in the hole?
No, you're okay. I was trying to keep my head around.
That not only do a lot of us have small children who, you know, we live in a small town community for a reason because we want our kids to be able to play outside.
Yeah, of course.
We also have teenagers who get home from work at 10 o'clock at night by themselves in their vehicles. And I can think of quite a few of us that are standing right here that have husbands that either are gone in the military or they work 24 or 48-hour shifts. And they will learn our husband's schedules.
For other young women around. And an agency that is supposed to have the responsibility for these people's supervision. They didn't operate well.
New tonight, the company behind a planned residence for convicted sex offenders in Tenino has pulled the plug. But in a statement today, Supreme Living said they were pulling out because the cost of complying with land use codes was just too high.
How we ultimately defeated it is it didn't meet any of the county code requirements as far as cooking, as far as that many people living in the structure.
So we contacted any local businesses that were out here to do any kind of inspections, whether it's for septic or water, and we put out a letter telling who Supreme Living was, who Angelo Ronaldo was, and do not service Supreme Living and support this less restrictive alternative. You know, that puts a bad name on their business as well. We need to stick together.
Or once the media really attached onto it and really kind of started portraying the story, people in other communities across the state started weighing into this as well, because of the fair share problem. Almost every county will have to house a sexually violent predator at some point and have an LRA in a community somewhere. And so through discussions with the governor, we found that we talked about closing the public notice loophole, which was bipartisan, and that was a separate bill that me and my seatmate in the Senate, Drew McEwen, we had a companion bill for in each chamber. It would have made sure that there was a lot of community involvement, there was public notice, there was town halls, the whole 9 yards. And I think that's kind of like the bare minimum that people expect. It wasn't enough for me, but that was a start, right? And at the time, the governor and his staffer really felt that they essentially said that they were interesting ideas, and we had a back and forth over public notice itself. His office didn't really like the idea of public notice because, well, they didn't want what was happening in Tenino or Enumclaw, the public outcry about these things, or the news media to really catch attention to the fact that they were releasing people into the community who were very violent and sex predators.
My understanding from the protocols that have been developed is that if there is a breach of that LRA, that DOC will immediately respond and arrest them. So that's my understanding.
Concerned residents lined the street outside a sex offender housing facility in Olympia on Friday. It's owned by Supreme Living, whose CEO, Angelo Ronaldo, previously proposed a less restrictive alternative facility in Tenino.
We're here to prove the point that she cannot keep people in. She is not safe. She shouldn't be trusted with this level of sex offender.
She's one of three digging deeper into the company for the last 32 days after the first public forum with the CEO.
Noticed that there was a name missing from their list, and they have a sex offender who's absconded.
The alleged non-compliant sex offender, William Morris III, a level 2 offender, a moderate risk to sexually reoffend.
You know, if you can't keep accountability for the lower offenders, how can we trust you in your organization to keep accountability for the worst of the worst? I just think it's a recipe for disaster.
Regarding Morris's non-compliance, Fox 13 reached out to the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, the Department of Social and Health Services, and the Department of Corrections and Supreme Living. They did not respond.
It's really eye-opening, honestly, and scary to think that this could be happening down the street from my house.
These are the 8 men registered to the facility on Martin Way. 7 of them are level 3, high risk to reoffend, and 1 level 2. Their convictions include rape, child molestation, and rape, and unlawful imprisonment with sexual motivation. Among them is Eric Wyatt, who failed to return to Western State Psychiatric Hospital after he was given a one-day pass back in 2014. DOC officers then described Wyatt as having the mental capacity of a 14-year-old who cannot control his sexual urges and is dangerous.
Here, we aren't going to stop. We aren't going to go away. We are here to end SVP releases into our communities.
Residents say they are being blindsided by the locations and sudden pop-up of such housing facilities. This one has 2 dance studios nearby, one just across the street.
They've removed NAP from the home now, and what we did is we sent a letter with a public records request to get the information that we want in the event that they put somebody else in there. And it also, our purpose was also putting the state on notice that if they put someone there and a child is molested or hurt as a result, then they are responsible for that.
Mr. Knapp received a total score of 6 on the static 99R, which places him at risk level IVB, or well above the average risk for being charged with or convicted of another sexual offense. Static 99R and stable 2007 scores can be combined to provide a composite assessment of risk/needs and to produce estimates of sexual recidivism. Knapp was in the above-average risk, level 4A category for being charged with or convicted of a new sexual offense.
The offender, as soon as he was placed in it, started violating, and there's a pattern these offenders follow when they're placed in a placement like this, where they start out with small violations and then to find out if anyone's watching them. And this guy did exactly that. There's a woman coming to pick him up and visit him that they told people she was his wife. She wasn't his wife. He hadn't been married, and she wasn't supposed to be doing it anyway. And then the person supervising the home was a sex offender himself. So everything on this one, it's really unbelievable that DOC and DSHS allowed a placement in this home.
After a big stink was made over Tenino, I got the same notification in our sex offender unit. But this time, our detective was like, red flag, and ran it right to us. It was like, hey, I just got this notification. So I was standing right out here in the common area, called DOC up. Like, yeah, so-and-so at DOC says that they're getting ready to cite a house, have a good day, kind of thing, right? Like, it was like, okay, well, name, number, so I call him. And the conversation was so awful. It was so awful. It was like, okay, so you guys are citing a house for a potential LRA insert? Well, if that's what you want to glean from this conversation. I don't know, you called me to notify me. I'm just asking, like, what is this? Well, I'm sure that you can read between the lines and see what's going on. I'm like, there's like talking in tongues the whole time. And I'm like, I'm not even trying to be mean. I just want to understand what this notification means. And they just wouldn't tell me. So after the fact, I was able to basically find out through the head of DSHS, like DOC was notifying us that they were doing an investigation on a house. Hadn't been selected, hadn't been presented to a judge yet.
You know, the purpose of the least restrictive alternative law is to notify the community and ensure that the community is safe. It allows an offender to be placed in the community if they're safe, but the community needs to know about it and to be on the alert. That's one of the reasons for the sex offender registration. So yeah, absolutely, the community needs to know.
Well, I became like a sex offender expert in a matter of months. I didn't know much about the LRA process. What was it, late last year? I went to McNeil Island, took the tour. These LRAs, is this something the government is truly being forced to do? Or is it something that someone somewhere is like, this is how we should do it? Because those are two really different things, I think. So the one question I haven't quite had answered yet is, why don't we just continue building LRAs on the island? Really more of a, well, we want to do this. We've seen, you know, whatever, I can't remember all of it. We've kind of seen that, like, it's almost more of like a doctor recommendation of like, if we can get them out into the community, like that increases their odds of success in the program to rehabilitate. I'm like, okay, but as long as we're clear, like this is something that the government wants to do. There's nothing that says that LRAs cannot just be housed on McNeil Island under a less restrictive alternative. There's no walls, there's a garden, there's views of the woods, of the sound. It's less restrictive.
This last session, I was a member of 2 budget committees, capital budget and appropriations. My seatmate, a member of the 3rd budget committee, the transportation budget committee. And so I got a really great front row seat to how our budgets are crafted, how we spend our money. And now as the assistant ranking member of the appropriations committee, I can clearly see that over the last decade, our state budget has more than doubled. When you include things like federal funding, it's well over $100 billion. And so we're spending a lot of money. We have more money than we ever had before. We had billion-dollar surpluses. We attach a dollar amount to a lot of things, and we give money to a lot of things. And it's our duty and responsibility to provide public safety in our state. And so the amount of money it costs to run, a special commitment center and an SCTF on McNeil Island and kind of have this program is really just a drop in the bucket. Now we have some time to really build stuff to give it the best absolute shot at passing or changing the law for the better.
I've introduced this bill at the recommendation of the Sex Offense Policy Board. This was a recommendation that came from them to provide a path off of lifetime supervision for the different classes of those who have been convicted of sex offenses. I've heard many stories over the years of those who have finished their period of confinement. They're in the community, they are behaving properly, no other criminal offenses, but the burden of being supervised has impaired their life in such a way that it's unsupportable.
This is House Bill 2303. It addresses 2 recent Washington Supreme Court cases regarding the conditions that are sometimes placed on individuals when they're released from prison. A person may now ask the court to modify community custody conditions based on a substantial change in circumstances. The bill also clarifies the authority of the Indeterminate Sentencing Review Board to impose or modify community conditions on individuals who are under its jurisdiction. Thanks, Representative Goodman, who's always on the job here. So let's smile for a second. All right. Hey, bud, good to see you.
Thank you.
You know, a lot of people would have been satisfied at having a hand in landmark legislation, but you became a member of the state legislature.
Yes, I did. I guess I thought it was easy to pass legislation after working on the task force.